The morning light filtered through the pale curtains of the small, sterile room, highlighting the wrinkles on Lucia's hands as they rested in her lap. At 93 years old, she had seen a lifetime of battles, triumphs, and sacrifices etched into her skin. But nothing had prepared her for the sharp sting of betrayal inflicted by the very people she had loved most, her children. Her trembling fingers traced the hem of her well-worn cardigan as her mind replayed that fateful day, the day she was taken away from the home she had built with her own hands. A lifetime of memories stripped away under the guise of a surprise. "You'll love it, Mama," Giovanni, her eldest, had said with a saccharine smile that didn't reach his eyes. His sister, Sophia, had chimed in, her voice falsely cheerful, "It's for your own good. You need special care now." But the truth came crashing down the moment Lucia saw the austere building looming before them, the San Giovanni residence for the elderly. She had pleaded, tears streaming down her face, "Please, don't do this. I don't need this. Take me home." But her words had fallen on deaf ears. They had already made up their minds. As the door to her small room in the nursing home clicked shut that first night, Lucia's world collapsed. The weight of loneliness pressed down on her chest, and she struggled to breathe. Her children had sold her home, taken control of her thriving company, and left her to wither away in this place, a place devoid of warmth, love, or the echoes of the life she had built. But that morning, as the sunlight danced on the walls, something stirred within Lucia. A fire reignited in her chest, fueled by anger, pain, and a fierce determination. She was no frail old woman ready to fade into obscurity. She was Lucia Carbone, widow, matriarch, and the founder of a multi-million-dollar empire. And she was not done yet. As her sharp mind began weaving a plan, she smiled faintly to herself. Her children thought they had outsmarted her, but they had underestimated the strength of a mother's love, and the power of a woman scorned. "How does one avenge a betrayal this deep?" she murmured aloud. The question hung in the air, unanswered but heavy with promise. Stick around to discover how one woman turned her pain into an intricate act of poetic justice that will leave you speechless. Lucia Carbone wasn't just any woman. She had once been the heart and soul of her community, a beacon of resilience and success in a world that had tried, and failed, to keep her down. Born in a small Italian village in the aftermath of the Great War, Lucia's life was shaped by hardship. Yet, she had never been one to complain. Every challenge was an opportunity to prove her strength. At 17, she left her village with nothing but a suitcase and a dream of a better life. She arrived in the bustling city of Florence and found work in a tiny textile factory. The hours were grueling, and the pay was barely enough to scrape by, but Lucia had something her co-workers lacked: vision. She studied every aspect of the business, from the sewing machines to the supply chains, all while tucking away every spare lira she earned. By 25, she had married Marco, a gentle soul who believed in her dreams as much as she did. Together, they pooled their savings and opened a small fabric shop. What started as a modest venture soon grew into something much larger. Lucia's keen eye for quality and her gift for connecting with customers earned her a loyal following. When Marco passed unexpectedly in his late 40s, leaving Lucia a widow with 2 young children, many thought it would break her. But Lucia turned her grief into determination. She expanded the business, transforming it into a thriving empire that supplied luxury textiles across Europe. Giovanni and Sofia grew up in the lap of modest privilege. Lucia spared no expense to ensure they had the best education, the best opportunities, and the best of everything. Yet, despite her sacrifices, there was always a distance between them. As adults, they seemed more enamored with the wealth she had built than the values she had instilled. Over the years, Lucia began to notice subtle changes in her children. Giovanni, once a bright and ambitious boy, became calculating and cold. He pursued law, not out of passion but because it promised power. Sofia, charming and vivacious, had a talent for networking but seemed more interested in flaunting the family name at high society events than in contributing to the family legacy. Lucia had always brushed off her concerns. "They'll grow into themselves," she would tell Marco's portrait that hung above the fireplace. "They're good kids at heart." But as the years passed, their behavior became harder to ignore. Giovanni began pressuring her to sign over parts of the business, claiming it would streamline operations. Sofia hinted at selling the family estate, suggesting it was too large for an aging woman to maintain. Lucia resisted, though the battles left her exhausted. She had built this empire with her blood, sweat, and tears, not for her children to squander but to carry forward with the same passion and care she had poured into it. Then came her 93rd birthday. Lucia had been hopeful that day. Giovanni and Sofia arrived unannounced, smiling and laden with gifts. They spoke of a special surprise, their voices sweet with false warmth. For a moment, Lucia allowed herself to believe they were there out of love. The truth revealed itself as they pulled up to the San Giovanni residence for the elderly. "This is for you, Mama," Giovanni said, his tone patronizing. "A place where you can finally rest and not worry about the company." "But I don't want to rest," Lucia replied, her voice trembling. "I want to be home, with my memories, my garden." Sofia's expression hardened. "Mama, you're not being reasonable. This is for your own good." Lucia's protests fell on deaf ears. Within hours, she was stripped of her home, her independence, and her dignity. Giovanni and Sofia had already sold the estate and taken control of the company, leaving her with nothing but a small room in the nursing home. Now, as she sat in that sterile room, the weight of their betrayal pressed down on her. The very children she had sacrificed everything for had discarded her like an old relic. But they had underestimated her. Lucia Carbone was not a woman to be dismissed so easily. Her sharp mind began to churn, weaving the threads of a plan that would remind her children exactly who she was. "They've taken everything I gave them," she whispered to herself, her voice steady despite the storm raging within. "But I'll show them what it means to lose something irreplaceable." The embers of anger in her heart began to spark into something much more powerful, a fire of determination. The days in San Giovanni residence blurred together, each one indistinguishable from the last. The monotonous rhythm of meal trays rattling down the hallways, the faint hum of television sets in neighboring rooms, and the occasional cries of confused residents painted a picture of despair. For many, this was a place where time stood still, a liminal space between life and death. For Lucia, however, it was a cage. Her once vibrant life, filled with purpose and ambition, now seemed like a distant dream. The sterile white walls, the scratchy institutional bedding, and the cold indifference of the staff reminded her at every turn that this was not her home. She was a guest in a prison disguised as a sanctuary. Lucia quickly learned the routine of the home. Mornings began with rushed visits from overworked nurses who checked vitals without sparing a smile. Afternoons were filled with bland meals served on plastic trays, followed by lackluster activities meant to distract the residents from their inevitable decline. She spent her time observing the others. There was Marta, a woman with clouded eyes who spoke only in whispers about the days when she danced in grand theaters. Next to her was Victor, a former mechanic who had worked tirelessly for decades, only to be abandoned by his children when his hands grew too unsteady to hold a wrench. As she listened to their stories, Lucia's heart ached, not just for them but for the grim realization that she had become one of them, forgotten and discarded. Yet, even amidst the sorrow, there was a flicker of defiance in her eyes. One evening, as the pale moonlight streamed through the thin curtains of her room, a nurse entered carrying a small envelope. "This came for you, Mrs. Carbone," the nurse said, placing it on the bedside table before retreating. Lucia's hands trembled as she picked up the envelope. Her name was scrawled across it in a familiar hand, Giorgio, her late husband's trusted lawyer. She tore it open, her heart racing. The letter was brief but powerful. "Lucia, the time has come to make the changes we discussed. The documents are ready. Contact me when you're prepared to proceed." Lucia felt a surge of energy coursing through her frail body. Giorgio had kept his promise, safeguarding the assets she had secretly moved out of her children's reach. The plan she had only vaguely considered before was now a tangible reality. Though many of the nursing home's residents had resigned themselves to their fate, there were a few who shared Lucia's fire. She began forming quiet alliances, listening to the wisdom of those who had lived through their own struggles. "Don't let them win, dear," Marta said one afternoon, her bony hand resting on Lucia's arm. "You've got fight left in you. I can see it." Victor, despite his gruff exterior, offered practical advice. "You'll need help. No one wins a battle alone. Find people you can trust." Lucia took their words to heart. She began to befriend the staff, offering warmth and genuine conversation in exchange for small favors. A sympathetic nurse agreed to let her use the staff phone after hours, and the janitor smuggled out a handwritten note to Giorgio on her behalf. Weeks passed, and Lucia began to feel the first stirrings of control returning to her life. Late one night, she sat at her small desk, illuminated by the faint glow of a bedside lamp, and outlined the steps of her plan. First, she would regain access to her remaining assets. Then, she would set her company and her wealth in motion, ensuring neither Giovanni nor Sofia would see another penny. Finally, she would teach her children a lesson they would never forget, a lesson about love, respect, and the cost of greed. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of rain tapping against the window. Lucia turned her gaze outside, watching the storm clouds gather. For the first time since arriving at San Giovanni, she felt a sense of purpose. "They think I'm finished," she whispered to herself, her voice carrying the weight of quiet determination. "But they don't know what I'm capable of." The rain intensified, mirroring the storm brewing within her. Lucia Carbone was far from defeated. The quiet hum of the nursing home's nighttime stillness was broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the small clock on Lucia's bedside table. While most residents drifted off into uneasy sleep, Lucia sat upright, a fire burning in her chest. She had spent weeks gathering her strength, recalling every lesson life had taught her about resilience, strategy, and the art of survival. It was time to act. Lucia had always been a planner. As a businesswoman, she thrived on crafting meticulous strategies that turned challenges into victories. Her situation now was no different, only the stakes had changed. The next step required someone she could trust outside the walls of San Giovanni. That person was Giorgio Conti, her late husband's lawyer and her most trusted confidant. Giorgio had been by her side for decades, advising her through the highs and lows of her business empire. His loyalty was unwavering, and he was one of the few people she knew would keep her secrets. Late one night, Lucia dialed the number scrawled at the bottom of Giorgio's letter. The phone rang twice before his familiar gravelly voice answered. "Lucia," he said, his tone a mixture of surprise and relief. "I've been waiting to hear from you." "Giorgio," Lucia began, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart, "I need your help. The time has come." She explained her predicament, outlining her children's betrayal and their callous abandonment of her. Giorgio listened intently, his occasional hum of acknowledgement the only indication of his growing fury on her behalf. "Lucia," he said after a pause, "will handle this carefully. The assets you entrusted to me are safe, and the legal groundwork is already in place. But this will require precision, and a touch of ruthlessness." Lucia's lips curved into a faint smile. "Ruthlessness is something I've never lacked, Giorgio. Let's begin." The first order of business was to ensure that Giovanni and Sofia's control over her company was revoked. Over the years, Lucia had strategically retained a minority share in the company's stocks, hidden in a trust under Giorgio's name. Now, it was time to use it. Giorgio filed an emergency injunction, citing financial mismanagement on Giovanni's part. With the help of a sympathetic board member who had long been loyal to Lucia, the injunction was upheld. Overnight, Giovanni was stripped of his authority in the company. The news hit Giovanni like a thunderbolt. Sitting in his sleek corner office, surrounded by the trappings of success, he stared at the legal documents in disbelief. "What do you mean, I've been removed?" he barked into the phone. The answer was clear: the company was no longer his to command. Lucia's daughter was no less culpable, and she would not escape her mother's wrath. Sofia had taken the family estate for herself, claiming she would maintain it as a legacy home. In truth, she had turned it into a lucrative rental property, leasing it out for extravagant events. Lucia penned a letter to Sofia, written in her precise, elegant script. "My dearest Sofia," it began. "You have always had a talent for seeing opportunities, but I fear you've lost sight of what truly matters. While you celebrate your successes, I remind you that what you hold now was not yours to take. I suggest you savor it while it lasts. Yours, Mama." Sofia dismissed the letter at first, thinking it the ramblings of an old woman. But when her rental agreements were abruptly cancelled due to a legal claim on the property's title, filed by Giorgio on Lucia's behalf, her confidence began to waver. With Giovanni and Sofia reeling, Lucia made her next move. She instructed Giorgio to call for a company-wide meeting and requested her presence be live-streamed from the nursing home. On the day of the meeting, Lucia appeared on screen, sitting in her modest room but radiating the authority she had always commanded. Her voice, though softened by age, carried the weight of steel. "My dear colleagues," she began, "for decades, I poured my heart and soul into building this company. I trusted that it would remain a beacon of excellence, a legacy not just for my family but for all of you who contributed to its success." Her piercing gaze seemed to pierce through the screen. Unfortunately, that trust was misplaced. "But rest assured, I am here to set things right. Together, we will rebuild and ensure that this company thrives, not as a vehicle for greed but as a testament to hard work and integrity." The room erupted into applause. Lucia's employees, many of whom had worked under her for decades, felt a renewed sense of hope. Giovanni, watching from the sidelines, clenched his fists in anger. Sofia, pale and trembling, realized the full extent of her mother's plan. As the day ended, Lucia sat back in her chair, exhaustion creeping into her bones. But despite her weariness, she felt a quiet satisfaction. Her children had underestimated her, blinded by their own ambition. She was just getting started. Lucia's victories against Giovanni and Sofia were only the opening moves in a carefully orchestrated game. Each action was calculated not merely to reclaim what was hers, but to deliver a lesson that neither of her children would forget. Yet, as satisfying as her initial strikes had been, Lucia knew the battle was far from over. The next phase of her plan required cunning, patience, and precision. If Giovanni and Sofia thought their troubles were isolated incidents, they were sorely mistaken. Lucia was playing the long game, and she intended to win. Lucia's empire wasn't just about money, it was about legacy. For years, she had quietly structured her estate with the help of Giorgio and a team of trusted advisors. Hidden within the intricate legal frameworks were provisions that would now serve her cause. The first step was altering her will. As it stood, Giovanni and Sofia were the sole beneficiaries, entitled to everything upon Lucia's death. But that was no longer an option. Lucia instructed Giorgio to transfer the majority of her wealth and properties into a charitable trust, a foundation dedicated to supporting underprivileged women entrepreneurs. "I built my life from nothing," Lucia said to Giorgio during one of their late-night phone calls. "Let this fortune go to those who still have the courage to dream, not to those who squander it." Her children would still receive a small inheritance, just enough to remind them of what they had lost. Sofia's transformation from doting daughter to opportunist had begun long before she abandoned her mother at the nursing home. For years, she had surrounded herself with superficial friends who admired her wealth and status. She threw lavish parties, wore designer clothes, and basked in the envy of others. When the legal claim on the family estate forced her to cancel upcoming events, Sofia found herself scrambling. She could no longer rely on the income from rentals to sustain her lifestyle. Worse yet, whispers of her mismanagement spread among her social circle. Invitations began to dry up, and those she had considered allies turned cold. Late one night, she called Giovanni, her voice strained with desperation. "She's ruining us," Sophia hissed. "We have to stop her." Giovanni, who was still reeling from his removal as CEO, sighed heavily. "You think I don't know that? But what can we do? She's a step ahead of us at every turn." The siblings argued, their frustration mounting as they realized how thoroughly their mother had outmaneuvered them. Giovanni's fall from grace had been swift and brutal. Without his position at the company, his influence in the business world diminished rapidly. Potential investors backed away, reluctant to associate with someone embroiled in controversy. To maintain appearances, Giovanni dipped into personal savings and took out loans to fund a facade of success. But the financial strain quickly began to show. Creditors called, deadlines loomed, and Giovanni's once imposing demeanor started to crack under the pressure. One day, as he paced his office, a courier arrived with a thick envelope bearing his mother's handwriting. Giovanni ripped it open, his anger flaring as he read the letter inside. "My dearest Giovanni," it began. "Success built on dishonesty is no success at all. You once had the potential to lead with integrity, but you chose another path. Consider this a wake-up call. It's not too late to change, if you have the courage to do so. Yours, Mama." Giovanni crumpled the letter in his fist, his jaw tightening. He wasn't sure what angered him more, his mother's words or the undeniable truth behind them. Lucia's next move was her boldest yet. With Giorgio's help, she organized a public press conference. The event, held in one of the city's most prestigious venues, was billed as the announcement of the Carbone Foundation, a new philanthropic venture funded by Lucia's fortune. Giovanni and Sophia, who learned of the event through media reports, arrived separately, their faces masks of fury and disbelief. They had expected a private confrontation with their mother, not a public spectacle. Lucia took the stage, her presence commanding despite her frail frame. The room fell silent as she began to speak. "For many years, I dedicated my life to building something meaningful," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I believed that what I created would be a gift for my children. But gifts should be earned, not taken for granted." Her eyes scanned the room, pausing briefly on Giovanni and Sophia. "The Carbone Foundation will support those who embody the values of hard work, honesty, and compassion. This is my legacy. And to my children," her gaze sharpened, "I hope this serves as a reminder that love and respect are far more valuable than wealth." The room erupted in applause, while Giovanni and Sophia sat frozen in their seats, their faces pale with humiliation. In the days following the announcement, the media frenzy surrounding the Carbone family reached a fever pitch. Journalists dissected Giovanni and Sophia's downfall, painting them as spoiled heirs undone by their own greed. Lucia, meanwhile, remained resolute. She had no interest in their public humiliation, it was merely a side effect of her larger goal. Her focus was on ensuring that her legacy would endure, untainted by their betrayal. Back at the nursing home, Lucia sat by her window, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Despite the chaos of the past months, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. For the first time, the weight of her children's betrayal felt lighter. She had done what she needed to do, not out of revenge, but out of a desire to protect the values she had fought so hard to uphold. "I am not finished yet," Lucia murmured to herself, a faint smile playing on her lips. "But this is a start." The public unveiling of the Carbone Foundation was a turning point. Giovanni and Sophia's carefully curated lives were now the subject of scrutiny and ridicule. Once regarded as members of the city's elite, they became symbols of entitlement and greed, their mother's bold actions sparking widespread conversations about the true meaning of legacy. But while the world watched their downfall, Lucia's battle wasn't over. There was one final confrontation she needed to have, a meeting that would test her resolve and lay bare the cost of betrayal. It was late afternoon when Giovanni arrived at San Giovanni residence. He had always been a commanding figure, his tailored suits and sharp features projecting authority. But today, his appearance was disheveled, his confidence eroded by months of turmoil. Lucia sat in her modest room, a cup of tea cradled in her hands, when Giovanni knocked lightly on the door. "Come in," she said, her voice calm but devoid of warmth. Giovanni stepped inside, his gaze sweeping the room. The sterile surroundings were a stark contrast to the luxury he associated with his mother. For a moment, he was struck by guilt, but he quickly buried it beneath his frustration. "Mama," he began, forcing a smile, "I thought it was time we talked." Lucia raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. "And what exactly do you want to talk about, Giovanni?" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "About everything. I know you're angry. I know Sophia and I made mistakes, but don't you think this has gone far enough?" Lucia set her teacup down with deliberate care. "Far enough," she echoed. "You sold my home, took my company, and left me here to rot. Tell me, Giovanni, what would you consider far enough?" Her words cut like a blade, and for a moment, Giovanni faltered. But his pride wouldn't let him admit defeat. "We're still your children," he said, his tone softening. "We made bad decisions, but we didn't mean to hurt you." Lucia's eyes narrowed. "Intentions mean nothing without actions, Giovanni. You and Sophia forgot what I taught you. Respect, loyalty, love, these were the foundations of our family, and you discarded them like they were nothing." 2 days later, it was Sophia's turn. Unlike Giovanni, she didn't arrive with an air of forced confidence. Her once perfect appearance was marred by exhaustion, her designer clothes hung loosely on her frame, and her eyes were rimmed with red. She entered Lucia's room hesitantly, clutching a small bouquet of flowers. "Mama," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry." Lucia regarded her daughter with a mix of pity and resolve. "Are you sorry for what you've done, Sophia, or for the consequences you now face?" Sophia's lip quivered. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I thought I was doing what was best for everyone. I thought you'd be happy to rest, to enjoy your last years without stress." Lucia leaned forward, her gaze unflinching. "You thought I'd be happy to be stripped of everything I worked for? To be abandoned and forgotten? Tell me, Sophia, where in your heart did you truly think of me, and not yourself?" Sophia collapsed into the chair opposite her mother, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know, Mama. I don't know anymore. I wanted to be enough. I wanted to prove myself." For the first time, Lucia's expression softened. "And you thought taking what wasn't yours was the way to do that? Oh, Sophia, my darling, strength isn't found in possessions or power. It's found in love, in kindness, in standing by the people who matter." Over the next week, Lucia met with Giovanni and Sophia together, the tension between them palpable. They argued, accused, and deflected blame, but Lucia remained steadfast. "You've both lost sight of who you are," she said firmly. "But I am not without blame. I gave you everything you asked for, but perhaps I didn't give you enough of what you needed: discipline, humility, and the understanding that nothing in life is free." Giovanni shifted uncomfortably. "So what happens now? You've taken the company, the house, what's left?" Lucia tilted her head, her expression sharp. "You think this is about punishment? No, Giovanni. This is about redemption. You've been given a second chance, to rebuild yourselves and our family. The question is, will you take it?" The siblings exchanged uneasy glances, their mother's words sinking in. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, Giovanni and Sophia began to reflect on their actions. Giovanni took a position with a smaller firm, rebuilding his reputation without relying on the Carbone name. Sofia sold off her luxury possessions and started volunteering with the Carbone Foundation, humbled by the stories of women whose struggles mirrored those of her mother's early years. Lucia watched their progress from afar, her heart heavy but hopeful. She knew the road ahead would be long, but for the first time in years, she saw glimpses of the children she had once raised. One evening, Lucia sat by her window, the golden hues of sunset washing over her face. She thought of Marco, of the life they had built together, and of the children they had loved so fiercely. "I've done what I can," she murmured softly. "The rest is up to them." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Lucia felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had fought for her legacy, not out of vengeance, but out of love. And in the quiet of that moment, she allowed herself to hope. Months passed, and the winds of change blew gently through the lives of Giovanni, Sofia, and Lucia. The storm of anger and betrayal had subsided, replaced by an uneasy truce. Though the wounds were far from healed, tiny seeds of redemption began to sprout in the ashes of their fractured relationships. Lucia, now 94, had settled into a rhythm at San Giovanni residence. The cold, impersonal space no longer felt as oppressive, it had become a place of reflection and quiet strength. Her victories over her children and her unwavering defense of her values had reminded her of the woman she had always been, a fighter, a survivor, and a mother who loved deeply, even when it hurt. For Giovanni, the months following his public fall from grace were a humbling experience. Stripped of his CEO title and the prestige that came with it, he faced the daunting task of rebuilding his career from the ground up. At first, he was consumed by bitterness, blaming everyone but himself for his predicament. But Lucia's words haunted him, "You once had the potential to lead with integrity." Determined to reclaim that potential, Giovanni accepted a position at a small but respected law firm. The salary was modest compared to his former earnings, but the work was meaningful. He represented struggling small businesses, often working pro bono for clients who reminded him of his mother in her early days. One day, after successfully helping a local bakery avoid bankruptcy, Giovanni found himself smiling, a genuine, unguarded smile. It was the first time in years he felt a sense of pride that wasn't tied to wealth or status. Sofia's transformation was equally profound. Her initial foray into volunteering with the Carbone Foundation had been motivated by desperation, a way to prove to her mother and the world that she wasn't a lost cause. But as she spent time with the women the foundation supported, something inside her began to shift. She listened to their stories of struggle and perseverance, stories that mirrored her mother's in ways she hadn't fully appreciated. These women didn't have luxury or privilege, yet they faced their challenges with grace and determination. Sofia began organizing workshops on financial literacy and professional development, using her networking skills to connect these women with mentors and opportunities. For the first time, she felt a sense of purpose beyond the superficial trappings of her former life. One crisp autumn morning, Lucia received a letter, this time from her children. She recognized Sofia's elegant handwriting on the envelope, but when she opened it, she realized it was a joint effort. "Mama," it began. "We have spent these past months trying to understand where we went wrong, not just in our actions, but in our hearts. You were right. We lost sight of who we are and what you taught us. But we want you to know that we are trying to change, to become the children you deserve." The letter went on to detail their efforts, Giovanni's work with small businesses, Sofia's role at the foundation, and their shared commitment to repairing their relationship with Lucia. "We know words are not enough," the letter concluded, "but we hope, one day, our actions will speak louder. Thank you for never giving up on us, even when we gave you every reason to." Lucia read the letter twice, her eyes misting over. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel a fragile hope. On Christmas Eve, Giovanni and Sofia visited the nursing home together. They arrived unannounced, carrying a basket filled with Lucia's favorite treats, biscotti, fresh figs, and a bottle of her beloved Chianti. Lucia was sitting by the window, gazing out at the twinkling lights that adorned the nearby trees. When she saw her children, her breath caught. They looked different, older, yes, but also softer, more grounded. "Mama," Sophia said, her voice trembling. "Merry Christmas." Lucia stood slowly, her frail frame belying the strength of her presence. She said nothing at first, simply studying them with the sharp, discerning eyes they had both come to respect. Finally, she smiled, a small, genuine smile. "Come in," she said. "It's cold outside." The three of them sat together, sharing stories, laughter, and tears. For the first time in years, they felt like a family again. As the months turned into years, the Carbone family found a new rhythm. Giovanni continued his work as a lawyer, often collaborating with the Carbone Foundation to support local businesses. Sophia became a full-time director at the foundation, her passion for helping others transforming her into a respected leader. Lucia, though increasingly frail, remained a guiding force in their lives. She was no longer the matriarch commanding an empire, but the values she had instilled in her children were finally taking root. One evening, as she sat surrounded by Giovanni, Sophia, and their own children, Lucia felt a peace she hadn't known in decades. She had fought for her family, not for their wealth, but for their hearts. And in the end, she had won. As Lucia's life drew to a close, she wrote one last letter. "To my dearest Giovanni and Sophia," it began. "I leave this world knowing that you have found your way back to yourselves and to each other. This was all I ever wanted, not wealth or success, but love, respect, and the courage to be better." She ended with the words she had always hoped they would remember. "Family is the legacy we leave behind. Guard it well." And so, Lucia Carbone's story ended, not in bitterness or revenge, but in redemption. She had taught her children the most important lesson of all, that love, not wealth, is the true measure of a life well lived. Thank you so much for watching this video and taking the time to explore this fascinating story with us. If you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us, and God bless us all.